on whose behalf are all these activities taking place? If there is a sense of being a separate, limited, located awareness, then inherent in that position is the feeling that I am a fragment, I am limited, I lack something, and therefore I need something, and I am temporary, and therefore I'm going to disappear or die. So hardwired into the belief of being a separate self is the feeling that I need something, I lack something, and I'm going to die, to disappear. These are the two essential ingredients of the separate self, the fear of dying and the feeling of lack. And all separate selves spend their life going out towards the outside world in search of something or someone to alleviate the sense of lack and shore up the feeling that I'm going to die. So in this case, when such a sense of a separate self is present, all our thinking, all our feeling, all our perceiving, all our acting, all our relating is undertaken on behalf of this sense of an incomplete self. So our character expresses, our character and our activities, our relationships, etc., express the fears, the anxieties, the doubts, etc., that are inherent in this belief and feeling of being a separate self. Now, when this separate sense of a separate self dissolves, or even begins to dissolve, the fears, the anxieties, the sense of being unworthy, of being guilty, of being unlovable, all these things go away because they were all dependent upon the belief of being a separate self. All the faculties, thinking, sensing, perceiving, acting, they all remain. And each body-mind has its own unique repertoire. And so it's all these faculties continue, but the question now is, what are they serving? What are they going to express now that it's not really that the separate self has gone, because the separate self is not a separate something. It's the feeling, the resisting, the seeking, the sense of lack. Now that this has gone or is going, all the faculties that we previously had, and those faculties are unique to each body-mind, they're still available, but they're now available to express and share and celebrate what we truly are, which is this unlimited, ever-present awareness, and the peace, the happiness, the love that is inherent in that, in ourself, is then expressed through all these faculties in the unique way that particular body-mind is configured. So it's not that such a character becomes a kind of bland, whitewashed wall with no character. On the contrary, actually, a character liberated from the sense of separation truly begins to flourish. Now, in one case, such a character may just live a very quiet life at home on their own or with their partner or their family, but another character, another body-mind is configured differently. They may be colourful and extroverted, and the same peace, the same happiness will express itself through that character in colourful, eccentric ways. Somebody else might be very creative, and this love and understanding would express itself in creative ways. Another body-mind may be very orientated towards serving in the community, and they might take up some kind of activity that's to do with sharing and helping others on a larger scale. So it puzzles me when I hear people say, does this understanding have any effect on your life, on the way you think, on the way you feel? And I just don't get the argument for people that says, no. I hear people that claim to have a non-dual understanding, and they say, I'm still unhappy, I'm still miserable. It doesn't have any effect at all, it hasn't changed my life at all. At best, in that case, let's give these people the benefit of the doubt and presume that they have had some genuine understanding. The understanding is incomplete. There may have been a genuine understanding, but it hasn't been taken into the body, and it hasn't been taken through the body out into the world. And the understanding cannot be said to be complete. I don't mean complete, there's no such thing as completion, but I don't think it can be really said to be the full non-dual realization if it's not embodied, if it's not lived in the body, and not just the way we feel our own body, but the way we act in the world and the way we relate with others. It's not enough just to understand, yes, I am unlimited, ever-present awareness. That's a big realization to come to. But to live in a way that is consistent with that understanding, that is a different matter. And it takes time, relatively speaking. After this realization has taken place, it takes time for the body, for the way we feel the body, and the way we act in the world and relate with others to be colonized by this understanding. The character is still there, and this love and understanding expresses itself through the unique qualities of that character. And different characters express it in such different ways. Someone may express it in a very colourful, extroverted way. Another person may be very quiet about it, not speak about it very much, not necessarily go around hugging everybody and sitting close to them and touching them, and it's fine, it's beautiful if it expresses itself that way, but it doesn't have to. I feel this intimate quality of friendship with so many different people. I express it in one way with my partner, another way with my child, and another way with all sorts of friends. It's the same quality of intimacy that is being tailored effortlessly and naturally, of course, in response to each situation. There can be the development of a body-mind, of a body and a mind, the way we think, the way we feel, the way we move, the way we act, the way we relate. That goes on developing forever. There's no end to the permeation of the whole structure of the body-mind with this understanding. So yes, there is a development, an endless development of the way we think, feel, act, relate, etc. But it's not the development of a person. At least the conventional premise in psychotherapy is that you come in as a separate self, and this separate self improves through various practices so it's not the person, it's not that separate self that is improving. But that doesn't mean that there's no continued growth of the whole structure of the body-mind. Of course there is. It's an endless process of realigning the way we think, the way we feel, the way we act, the way we relate, the way we move, the way we do everything. Realigning it. Once all these activities are no longer being undertaken on behalf of a separate, limited, fearful, lacking sense of self. But all these activities are now gradually being realigned and are being undertaken on behalf of, or as an expression of, the peace and the love and the understanding that is inherent in what we are. So that realignment of the mind and the body goes on forever. For instance, let me give you an example. I did a meeting here, the meeting I did a few days ago, and I gave a sort of introduction, and then we opened it up for questions, and then I got the red card flashed at me. You've got 2 more minutes, and there were 4 hands going up in the room, so I was answering questions quicker and quicker, and then right at the last minute someone said something like, asked me a question about mantra meditation, and I knew I was already well over time, and I made some dismissive comment about it. I actually practiced mantra meditation for 25 years, and so I have a lot of experience of it, and it was an absolutely essential part of my spiritual journey. That doesn't mean to say that I would recommend it for everyone, but I would never suggest anyone stop doing it if they wanted to do it. However, I had 20 seconds to answer, and I didn't want to go there because I could tell the question was a little bit, it wasn't really in line with the drift of where we were going. It was, and I had 10 or 20 seconds, so I just said, oh no, that's like this. And then the meeting came to an end. And then afterwards I thought, that was a little dismissive. If I had had 10 minutes, I would have qualified what I had said. I would have, so that she didn't feel, and I thought afterwards, anyone in the room who practices mantra meditation must have thought, oh, wow, okay, he's just totally dismissed my practice. And I realized that was insensitive. So I thought, okay, if you're in a position of someone speaking about these things, you have to be careful the way you do that. I think, okay, next time, if I had to do that again, I wouldn't answer like that. I would have answered in a way, I would have said what I feel about meditation, but I would have kept her on board. I wouldn't have. So that's a tiny example. That can happen any time in life. Something happens and you think, oh, what was expressed, what came out, didn't really express my understanding. So that was an old habit of the mind, a little bit too quick, a little bit sharp. And so that's just a tiny example of something that as time goes on, that tendency of the mind can be just brought in line with what you really feel. And you know, there are obviously innumerable examples in personal relationships, in activities, and where it takes time for the whole structure of our minds and bodies to be realigned with this understanding. And you can never say that process comes to an end. When could anyone say my body-mind is now a perfect instrument or expression of the light of pure knowing? I don't think one could ever say that, because who knows what's around the corner when some old habit is going to be triggered by someone or something. You see, I think for so many of us, things have changed a lot, you know, as a result of this conference and other similar activities. But for many of us, let's say until 10 years ago, 15 years ago, most of us went either literally or intellectually. We went to India to find, and we heard and read about the great sages, Ramana Maharshi. None of us ever met him. What do we have? 3 or 4 photographs of this angelic smiling face. You think of Ramana Maharshi, we all think of the same 1 or 2 images, this beautiful, loving, peaceful. So we never met him. We never lived with him. We never saw what it was like. Now, I'm sure Ramana Maharshi was a truly beautiful character, but I've also heard stories from reputable sources that, you know, from time to time he snapped at people. He was a real man. He had relationships with people. So, but because we never spent time close to someone like that, we have this kind of whitewashed image of him, that he was just this bland, beaming, peaceful character. I'm sure he was an extremely peaceful character, but we didn't have the benefit of spending time really close. You know, he read the papers. He discussed what was going on in politics. He was interested in life, and so that's one of the valuable things of having friendships with people who have this understanding and share this understanding, because we see how ordinary they are, how human they are. They have children, you know, they have children that have difficulties. They have to handle them. They have to educate their kids. They have to earn a living. They have to do everything that we all have to do. And we see the very human face of this understanding. So that's one of the benefits, and it's one of the beautiful things about this conference. It facilitates that. But there's also another thing, which is in India, the witnessing position of awareness was enshrined in their culture, in their monasteries, in their ashrams. And the kind of mainstream Advaita went as far as the witnessing presence of awareness in the background and the body, mind and world in the foreground. And moreover, the body, mind and the world are a bit of a distraction. So best to retire into your ashram or your cave or your sitting room, and don't get too involved with them. They're dangerous. So, and this was enshrined in institutions and in the West, in monasteries as well, this attitude towards the body and the world as being something that is dangerous. In fact, I was reading some commentaries on Ramana Maharshi recently. Not it wasn't his writing, but very close disciples of his who referred to the despicable body and the monstrous world. I mean, considering the body and the world in such negative terms, as if they were kind of monsters and demons that could tempt you away from being the peaceful presence of awareness. And this was kind of enshrined in the Indian culture. Of course, there were that wasn't the whole of the Advaita teaching. There was a tantric part of the Advaita teaching in which these two, awareness plus the world, came back together again, and the world was not seen as a distraction from your true nature. But even in India, the tantric approach was, and by tantric I just mean all-inclusive, that includes the body and the world. But that was not for mainstream. It was never for mainstream people. It was secret. It was not on offer mainstream. I think things have changed very much in the West. We are not a culture that thinks the body and the world are dangerous. We love the body and we love the world. And that's why it's the tantric expression of the non-dual teaching that is now being shared much more in the kind of contemporary non-dual expression. There's of course a danger to that, which is that really discovering that what one is not just awareness. It's not enough to discover that we are the presence of awareness, but to discover that awareness is without limits and ever present. That is the real discovery to be made. And if we can call it a danger, it's not a danger, but one of the possible shortcomings of the contemporary approach to Advaita is that this, what could be called an intermediate stage, the awareness plus objects stage, is sometimes overlooked a little bit too quickly, because we are now so nervous of separating ourselves out from life, and exactly what we've just heard now, this view that some people have that the Advaita teaching is just standing as the aloof, witnessing presence of awareness. Of course, that's only half the Advaita teaching. So the teaching that is being referred to in such situations is not really the true Advaita teaching. It's a very partial view of it. It's a misunderstanding, really. That's the direct way to go. That's the direct path, which I feel is the path that is most appropriate for our age and our culture. We go straight to what we are. We don't, in other words, there are no prerequisites in the direct path. It's not the old yogic path or progressive path where you had to purify the body, then you purify the mind, and then 20 years later you get given the real teaching. Here we start, not the real teaching, the ultimate teaching. Here we start with that, we go directly towards it. What are you essentially? And then you having explored that and discovered that, it's then the colonization of the mind and the body, the realignment of the mind and the body is a post-enlightenment sadhana. It's not pre-enlightenment sadhana. The body and the mind have to be cleaned out at some stage. Whether you do it before or after doesn't really matter, but at some stage, if this understanding, when I say this understanding, I mean if peace, if happiness, if love are going to be our stable experience, then the whole mechanism of our thoughts, feelings, activities, relationships have to be gradually washed clean of the sense of separation. Now, in the direct path, you go straight to your true nature. Having seen that, you then cooperate. There's a loving cooperation at the level of the mind, and particularly the body, which is usually neglected in contemporary Advaita. There's a cooperation of the way we feel the body and move and act and relate with the body. It's a cooperation that takes place after we have clearly seen who we are. So the question is, can that be done beforehand? Can you? And the answer is yes. If You know, most people that go to a therapist are not going because they're seeking the ultimate reality, what is truly real in our experience. They go because they want to be relieved of suffering. They're having a terrible time at home or at work or you know, all the reasons, the common reasons for going to therapy. And in almost all cases, it would not be appropriate for the therapist to say, don't pay any attention to that. Who is it that is aware of all this? And then to follow that one back to its source. That would be inappropriate in almost all cases. So the therapist has to be skillful. We're presuming that the therapist has an experiential understanding of non-duality. In such a case, the therapist has to go to where their client is and just take maybe just one step. And they use whatever modality that they've been trained in. They can't go all the way back to awareness in one session. So it may be that it's necessary to give provisional credibility to the separate self. The therapist will say, he won't say it, or she won't say it, but he or she will think, okay, I'm going to pretend that the separate self, on whose behalf this suffering is taking place, is real, and I'm going to give that separate self something to do. So the therapist will slowly walk with their client, and at some stage, if the relationship lasts long enough, it may be possible, after probably quite a lot of time together, to at some stage just drop in the question, and you know, who is it that is noticing this whole display of thoughts and feelings? And so yes, it's possible to go that way, but even if you go that way, at some stage you have to ask the question, you have to turn your attention away from the drama of the mind and the body and the world. The answer is, can never be found there. How you get to that question and how long it takes varies from case to case, and that's the skill of the therapist or the teacher. Not always just to say, you are eternal, infinite awareness, there's nobody there, there's nothing to do. That's not skillful teaching. You know, you may occasionally say that, but on the whole, you don't say that. Ramana Maharshi said, my experience is that there's no world, there's no manifestation, there's no creation, there's no self, there are no objects. He said, but I can't say this to people. One or two people I can say it to, even my closest disciples, I can't say it to them. They don't understand. Therefore, I have elaborated this method of self-inquiry for them. It's a slightly watered down version of my understanding, but it's a concession, a compassionate concession to their understanding. And then many people didn't even get what he meant by self-inquiry. So then he says, okay, I'll water it down a bit more to tailor it to your understanding. And so he had all these different layers, all of which were his understanding tailored to the particular need of the moment. Zaya, take our friendship. We've known each other for several years. I consider you a very close friend, and this is what I call intimate friendship. But if you asked me, if I had to write down what I know about you on a piece of paper, I would be embarrassed to give you the piece of paper. How little I know. Somebody even asked me the other day, you know, what country do you come from? And I thought, oh, I've even forgotten. Where is that? Somewhere in Eastern Europe. I can't remember. I mean, I know so little about you, and actually, you know very little about me, about my. I mean, we both know that we have a child. But we know very little about each other. Does that impact the quality of our friendship? One jot? If I told you some of my life story, would you feel closer? Would this friendship grow in intimacy? No, it wouldn't. And yes, if there was something present in our lives that we wanted to share with each other, then of course we would share that with each other. But the quality of the friendship is not dependent on what we know about each other. I have people here that I see year after year, and people that come to my retreats, very often I don't even know their names. I meet so many people now, I can't remember their names. And yet the quality of friendship, it's like we've known each other for 30 years. I don't mind what their story is. Nothing they could tell me would change the quality of friendship. So That's not a suggestion that there's anything wrong with knowing about each other's stories. Of course not. In some relationships, obviously, close, intimate relationships, it's important to get involved with a story. We're living with the person. But it's not necessary. It's not necessary for intimacy. Intimacy is it's just heart to heart. It's a quality of openness, of sensitivity. It's not about what we know about each other. And as we all know, that there are plenty of people that we know a great deal about, and yet we feel this lack of openness. It's a mistake. I think it's a mistake. Let me give you a metaphor for what a personal consciousness would be. Imagine the sun shining, and you take a mirror, and the mirror shines. The sun shines into the mirror, and with that beam of light you illumine objects. Now, right now you are knowing your experience, yes? We're just knowing this experience, thoughts, feelings. That knowing, we believe that knowing lives in here and is a product of this body. In other words, we believe and feel that the knowing with which we know our experience lives in the body and is a byproduct of the body. It's not. The knowing with which we know our experience, that knowing itself is infinite awareness. It's like saying that the beam of light that comes from the mirror is a product of the mirror and proceeds from the mirror. It's that absurd. It's not. The light with which the mirror illumines all these objects comes from the sun, from the infinite light of the sun. It seems to be limited when it shines in the mirror. It seems that the sun's light takes on the limited qualities of the mirror. And we say it's the mirror that is illuminating the objects with its own little limited package of light. That is individual consciousness. The individual has its own little package of knowing or consciousness within it, with which it knows its experience. It's a mistake. Right now, the very knowing with which you are knowing your experience belongs to infinite awareness.